Hey everybody, Siggi the Iceland triathlete here, and welcome to today's video, which will be a little bit different than most of my previous videos, and arguably probably a little bit different than most triathlon videos you're going to be seeing on YouTube. So what we're going to be going over shortly today is my newest blood chemistry analysis. This is actually a blood test that we do in our company in Greenfit with our cooperating company Garmin. They do the blood measurement, they give us the results, and then we interpret them with the report system we are using at this current point in time. And what I wanted to go over with you is just my values, what I take in with regards to my personal values, how I'm going to be using this to optimize my training and my nutrition in the future. And hopefully you're going to be learning something from this as well. Without further ado, let's just jump into this. So 48 biomarkers considered in this report. For me, 29 were considered optimal, with 7 and 6 above optimal and standard, and 6 below optimal. There was nothing below standard, nothing alarmingly low or high, but you know, some opportunities here and there that we're going to be going over. What we always begin with looking at is the blood glucose and blood sugar regulation. So what we want to see here is generally as much green as we can. So fasting glucose at least under 5 millimoles per liter, but we would say that the optimal values would be under 4.8 millimoles per liter in the morning. Hemoglobin A1C, this is actually what we use to measure if a person has a tendency to develop type 2 diabetes. Going up, you know, a 0.1% here on this scale is a pretty high jump. We would like to see insulin as low as we can. So this here is actually as low as it can get with a laboratory assay. So this is 2 units per liter or 13.9 picomoles per liter. So this would indicate that there's no, you know, additional load on the blood sugar regulation when I wake up. So everything is at balance when I wake up. And this is actually something that we see a lot of today. People are, you know, starting to becoming really elevated in fasting insulin levels. And when we see them here above the standard, for example, that would mean that, you know, the person has a high probability of developing insulin resistance. So this is something we want to see as low as we can. So reducing carbohydrates, for example, in your diet, if you are just a normal person, would be a good idea if you have a high fasting insulin, for example. But this is a profile we usually tend to see with, you know, high-level athletes, people who are, you know, moving around a lot, have a balanced diet. This is probably what we would end up seeing a lot of. But, you know, everything looking solid here, so no additional comments on this. This just proves to me that, you know, the balance I have with the fat, the protein, the carbohydrates in my diet probably is, at least with the carbohydrate, is optimal, or at least for my blood sugar regulation. So really good to see there. Renal function, I measured the blood urea nitrogen compounds and creatinine just to get a little bit of a status there. Slight increase in the urea nitrogen compounds. This could mean that there's some kind of a problem with the kidneys, but in this case, as we can see later in the report, this is probably just due to some mild dehydration. So I'm not going to be having too much worries about this. So just being mindful about the water during the day might be able to alleviate this here. Uric acid, optimal. This is really good to see. People who are developing metabolic syndrome, for example, about 1/3 of the population today, tend to be a little bit higher in uric acid. So this is good to see in the optimal range. I measured some enzymes, the amylase and the lipase. These are 2 enzymes that the liver produces and are really critical with the pancreatic function in the digestive system. And if you would see an increase in these values, for example, that would mean there is some biliary dysfunction, but, you know, everything looking pretty good here. Total protein in the blood, optimal as well. Albumin, maybe on the lower side of the optimal range. I'm not worried at all about this, but if I would be seeing this a little bit lower than this, That could mean that some vitamin C supplementation could be beneficial. Going to the liver and gallbladder, alkaline phosphatase a little bit decreased. This would indicate that maybe there are some opportunities with regards to my bone health. Zinc supplementation, probably the way to go here, has been shown to increase the alkaline phosphatase, which would facilitate healthier bone growth. So yeah, that would be definitely something to aim for. So I'm going to note that, increase the zinc, or at least start the zinc supplementation. I'm not taking any zinc. Zinc glutamate would probably be the preferred option. And then we have these 3 values here, which are all above the standard range. Important to note here, single measurements are often useful to determine certain kinds of conditions, but trends are even more valuable. And I have measured these 3 values on 3 separate occasions in the last 2 years, and they are coming down gradually. So I'm not worried about this, even though it's above the standard range, because what I'm doing today with regards to my nutrition, with regards to the training, it has been working to lower these values down. We tend to see an increase in these values if there is some load on the liver, for example, but this could also just mean some muscle breakdown. And I'm highly suspecting that to be the case in the past. I wasn't watching out for, the optimum balance between the training and recovery phase. This is actually what my watch today is telling me a lot about, with measuring the heart rate variability during the night, and resting heart rate, just being more mindful about the recovery and the training. And I think that has helped a lot to kind of balance the system, and it is helping me to get these values down. But some additional protein supplementation right after a workout might probably also facilitate this a little bit. Bilirubin, GGT, these 2 would be elevated, for example, if there were some biliary dysfunctions going on. So nothing to see here, pretty happy with that. And the ratio here between these 2 liver enzymes, a little bit above the optimal. Normally for a person that maybe has a higher insulin level and a higher blood sugar level, this could mean insulin resistance, or at least a tendency towards that. But in my case, I'm not too worried about that, especially since I'm seeing these values come down. So I'm not going to be looking too much at this, but I'm just going to be keeping an eye on this in the future. Iron levels, everything looking optimal here, except the serum iron. A little bit below the optimal range, but I'm not going to be too worried about this. But it's actually pretty common with, for example, women, because of their menstruation cycles, to be low in, for example, ferritin. So just watch out for that. That could actually mean that if you're really fatigued, if you have a shortness of breath, that could actually just mean that you're low in ferritin and low in iron. So but everything looking solid here. Iron binding capacity, this is actually how much iron is bound to my transferrin in my blood. That's the protein that moves the iron around the body. So yeah, just happy with how everything is looking here. My favorite is the cholesterol chapter, because just we've been taught that high cholesterol means automatically something bad, but I've actually been higher. And since I came off my keto diet and a really low carbohydrate diet, I've actually come down in total cholesterol. But it's impossible to really know what you've been doing to your lipid function in your body unless you know how many particles you're actually carrying around. So I usually use the analogy of, you could be transporting people in the traffic, but you could transport them in a bus, or you could have many, smaller cars to transport the same amount of people. And the same goes for cholesterol. You could have, large, bulky trafficking molecules, and you can also have really many smaller trafficking molecules. And we don't really know how many molecules you have. There is a way to measure that, but we can't do that in Iceland at the moment. But yeah. What we tend to look at then instead are the trends and some of the ratios between these values. So we tend to look at triglycerides. This is actually just a storage form of fat in the body. We don't want this to become elevated because that would indicate that there is an overaccumulation of fat from, in most cases that's excess glucose or excess fructose in the diet, and to not really good enough fat oxidation rates. But yeah, we look at the cholesterol to the HDL ratio. We look at especially this one here, the triglyceride to the HDL ratio, because that's usually telling you if there's some kind of a danger with regards to heart disease, and LDL to HDL ratios. But this is nothing here that I'm too concerned about. Vitamins, everything good here. I mean, doctors in Iceland usually prefer people to be between 80 and 100, so I'm not going to be supplementing with vitamin D unless I drop below 190 or 85. But vitamin B12 just optimal, so nothing to really say about that. Here comes some interesting things. Red blood cell count a little bit above optimal, as well as the hemoglobin, which is how much hemoglobin is bound to the red blood cells. And when you see these two both elevated at the same time, that usually indicates some kind of a dehydration. So again, as we saw with the uric or urea nitrogen compounds in the blood, in the kidney or the renal chapter, this is probably just an indication that there is some kind of a dehydration going on at the point of the test. So I need to just be more mindful of the fluids I take in. Hematocrit, optimal. This is the ratio of red blood cells in your blood plasma. And here we see a little bit of an increase in mean corpuscular volume. So the volume of, or the mean volume of the red blood cell. A little bit on the higher side, which could mean, as with a little bit lower albumin level like we saw before, I might benefit from a little bit of vitamin C supplementations. Everything else looking pretty normal except the platelet volume, a little bit on the higher side, but I've always been at this point here, so I'm not going to read too much into that at this point in time. White blood cells also, as very close to optimal, a little bit on the lower side, which could mean that I haven't had any kind of an infection or severe infection for the last weeks, and then also virtually no inflammation in the body. No chronic inflammation, which is a really good thing. So all in all, I mean, no really big issues to be found. It's mainly with regards to the hydration status. And then, as we saw with the alkaline phosphatase, probably could benefit from some zinc supplementation that would facilitate with stronger bone reinforcement. And then some vitamin C due to a little bit lower albumin and a little bit higher MCV. But everything else looking pretty solid. So, my current diet, which, I eat mostly just, whole foods, cook everything myself. I'm pretty low in carbohydrates in general, but I supplement with extra carbohydrates when I do the intense sessions I do. So, for example, oats, bananas, sourdough bread, a little bit of sweets, maybe in between, when I need them. But as a general rule of thumb, I try to be, controlling my blood sugar pretty well. And that's something we can actually see. Low triglycerides and iron status optimal. So everything here would indicate that, what I have been doing and what I'm doing at the current point in time is the correct strategy for me, with some additional things like, vitamin and mineral supplementation, as well as the hydration status. So yeah, I hope you learned a little bit from this. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to comment or ping me directly. But otherwise, I'll keep on keeping you posted on what I've been doing, and I'll see you in the next one.